Hi, I'm Brittany Rizzo, and welcome back to My Only Friends. On today's episode, I had the privilege of talking with PhD Loretta G. Breuning. Loretta is the founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and Professor Emerita of Management at California State University, East Bay. She is the author of many personal development books, including Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin Levels. My time with Loretta reminded me of the Friends episode, the one with the monkey. In this episode, we meet Ross's monkey Marcel for the first time, and in my conversation with Loretta, we talk a ton about the theory of monkey see, monkey do. I learned a lot in this interview and have been thinking about our conversation and her book ever since. There's so much value in understanding why your brain works the way it does. I hope you enjoyed learning something new with me and Loretta G. Breuning. How are you? It's nice to meet you.
Good. Nice to meet you.
How do you say your last name?
Breuning.
Breuning. Loretta Breuning.
Yeah, it's my ex-husband's name, but.
So I'm really excited to talk to you today, especially because, so your book is called Habits of a Happy Brain. And yes. I literally if you've listened to this podcast before, you know I'm obsessed with Jennifer Aniston. And she just had this interview come out and they were like, what are some of your bad habits? And she's like, I have none. Maybe too much salt in my food. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course that's her answer. And I am like, well, I have so many bad habits. So I'm like, okay, help me become more like Jennifer Aniston. So you're a perfect guest. You're a perfect guest for us.
Okay.
So tell me a bit about yourself.
Sure. Let's see. I was a college professor for 25 years. And when I was 49, they legally had to send me a letter that told me about my retirement benefits when I turned 50. Mm-hmm. And that letter burned a hole in my pocket. And I quit when I was 50. And then I started a new life, I guess I would say, where I got to focus more on the reality as I experienced it rather than the theory that I learned from books, which wasn't working for me. So this is how I came to put together little pieces of information that I learned basically about how the monkey brain works and how it just totally explains all of our daily life experience.
Right. So you would say that was the inciting incident for you to be like, okay, I'm really going to dive in to figuring out how our brains work.
Yeah, well, I didn't have to retire at 50. I wanted to end being in an academic environment where I was forced to have a sort of textbook explanation of life that was obviously not true to me. And part of the background was, like many people, I grew up around a lot of unhappiness. And I was always trying to figure out, what's everybody so upset about? And that's why I originally got interested in psychology and put all my faith in it. And then when it disappointed me, that I just had to keep looking.
Right. There are so many things in this book. I mean, I'm on chapter 6 right now. So, and there's a lot of information. So I want you to explain to my audience the differences of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And you go through in the book how each one is affected in negative and positive ways, and how we're always seeking ways to keep these things to survive. I mean, the one thing I've been, taking away from the book is that we are all just trying to survive in the best way that we know how, whether we know if it's a good way or a bad way. We're all just like built to survive.
So, yes, but then people may say, well, so why do people do things that are not good for them? So we're built to survive. We're built to do things that spark our happy chemicals, because in the animal world, happy chemical turns on when you do something that meets a survival need. But in the human world, none of us are born hardwired. So we define what's good for us from early experience. And early experience builds these big highways in your brain. That's what turns on your happy chemicals. And that's what guides you to say, oh, this is good for me and this is bad for me. And we can update those highways, but it's very hard. So we usually don't. And so I could, explain each.
Yeah, my brain's going like a mile a minute right now because I have so many questions and I'm in the middle of the book. So I'm like, I feel like I'm not sounding very eloquent. I also have a head cold, so I apologize. But because I'm like, I have this question and this question, I want to know everything. And that's how my brain works and my survival mode at the moment.
Yeah.
But right, that by the time you're 7 years old, your core circuits are built. So would you say that we carry the most trauma, is that how childhood trauma stays in our system until we're adults? Because we've built these core circuits at such a young age and we don't know how to let them go?
Yes, but, okay. It's true, but calling it trauma gives us a very hopeless victim-y take on it. Mm-hmm. So the reality is, for example, our hunter-gatherer ancestors raised their children with a fire and campfire, big flames going on all the time. Imagine today if I was raising a little toddler in a room with a fire going on all the time. I'd probably get reported to Child Protective Services or something. But our brain is designed to learn from pain. So every little child learned that if you get too close to the fire, it hurts. And the bad feeling wires you with a really big surge of bad feeling is like big paving on a neural pathway that says the next time you get near fire, a bad feeling turns on so fast and you pull back. Mm-hmm. So today, we don't want our children to have to learn from pain. We think that you should have no pain at all. And so every little bit of pain gets labeled as a trauma. Mm-hmm. And then we don't have confidence in the navigation system that we've inherited.
Right. It's like you want to be able to have a child build some thick skin for this world.
That's a way to say it. Yeah. Yeah.
There's your cortex will look for patterns to override the limbic system. This is something I wrote down. Explain that to me.
So, classic example, you go to a meeting or a party and then you feel really upset for some reason. So you think, oh, that person is mad at me, or some bad feeling turns on because something reminds you of some bad experience in your past. But then your cortex says, oh, you shouldn't be upset about that. You shouldn't care about that. I don't care about that. I'm not creating that feeling. They must be doing something bad. If I feel bad, they must be doing something bad for me because I didn't create that feeling myself. So we have these two different brains and they don't communicate with each other because the part of your brain that controls your emotional chemicals is inherited from animals, and animals can't talk. So your animal brain can't tell you in words why it's releasing the chemicals. So your verbal brain is always looking for explanations, like what's going on? Why am I always having these ups and downs? And it comes up with explanations that are not necessarily true, that make you look good.
Right. It's so interesting. I just had this thought of because you are so self-aware, obviously, you're very aware of how your brain works. And sometimes I feel do you feel like being so aware of how your brain works is more helpful? Or does it make certain things kind of are you ever I just want to feel things instead of analyze them all the time? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I'm glad that I'm aware how my brain works. And I wish I learned decades ago. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because if I went to a meeting or a party and walked out with a bad feeling, I wish I had the distance to say, oh, I created that feeling myself. It's not a real survival threat. But instead, when the bad feeling turns on, it's a full body experience that feels like a real threat because that's how our chemistry evolved to work. Mm-hmm. So I wish I knew that earlier. And the same with good feelings. Like often people feel like I urgently want this, I urgently want that. And you know that sometimes we urgently want things that are not good for us, because when you were young, that good thing was connected to something that was survival based. Mm-hmm. And that's why you think you absolutely need it. And so it's sort of good to say, well, you know, I don't really absolutely need that. I just want it because of that old pathway.
Right. Right. And, you know, I wrote that down too. Good feelings evolved because they get us to do things that promote survival. You know, you write about how, like, when you see a lizard going out in the sun, it's not because it's like just sunbathing. It's because that's a way to survive.
Yeah, that's the way a lizard raises its body temperature, because it doesn't produce warmth internally like a mammal. Mm-hmm. But while it's out in the sun, it's more easily eaten by predators. So what I'm saying in that chapter is, so a lizard always has two bad choices. I'd rather hide under a rock, but then I'll die of hypothermia. So I'll go out into the sun only long enough to warm up myself and then go back and hide under a rock. So when we see the lizard in the sun, we think, oh yeah, they have a good life. They're just happy hanging out all the time. And we don't see the reality.
Right. So what's an example you would equate to humans in that situation?
Yeah. So for example, you might see somebody who's going out socializing a lot. And you think, oh yeah, they're just having a good time, and you know, everything comes easily to them. But they may come home with a lot of stress and anxiety, and you don't see that. And every mammal, like animals, have a lot of conflict in their social groups, and they're always weighing that. Like, am I better off following the herd or charting my own course to a greener pasture? And they're constantly deciding what's better in that moment. And it's better to know that everyone has this struggle, instead of thinking that someone else just has this constant, effortless flow of happiness and you're missing out on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Your book has definitely made me have more compassion towards, you know, I always try to have more compassion towards others and towards myself. It's something that I've tried really hard to work on. But when you do understand that we're all just trying to survive, it does make you go, okay, like all of us were given this life in this brain with no handbook, you know, and now we do have tools to start learning more and more about our brains and, you know, why we choose the things we do. So it is, you know, some people just haven't gotten there yet. So to have compassion towards them and their journey to like self-discovery is really important.
Yeah. And we're all trying to survive. We're all trying to feel good and avoid feeling bad, because to the animal brain, that's the same thing. Good feelings mean you're on the path to survival, and bad feelings mean that your survival is threatened. So that's why we're so eager to do things in that way. But again, we're all just trying to survive with the neural pathways we built in youth and adolescence, because that's our guide to what is survival, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you say no one gives us a guide, so every human society has struggled to write the guide, but it's always been flawed, because our verbal brain and our mammal brain don't communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to write that guide, because I've had the benefit of first reading all this animal research and then liberating myself from academic psychology. Mm-hmm. And with each book, I try to write that guide in a simpler and simpler way.
Yeah. And like, speaking of having more compassion when understanding the brain, you talk a lot about empathy and how to be empathetic towards somebody. And I guess my question is, how do we stay empathetic without completely taking on the pain of others?
Yeah. So I was not necessarily advocating empathy as the solution. I was discussing the fact that other people advocate empathy as the solution.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that we are not designed to take on the pain of others per se. So we're designed to promote survival, and social alliances promote survival, and empathy helps you build social alliances. Okay. Mm-hmm. In addition, another whole layer is we have this thing called mirror neurons, where we mirror the feelings of others in order to learn. So if you get excited about something, my brain mirrors that. If you get upset about something, my brain mirrors that, because that's how a monkey learns from another monkey. It's like, oh, he gets excited when he succeeds at cracking open a nut. He gets terror when he sees a snake. And that's how I learned to get more nuts and avoid snakes. So that's how the animal brain learns to promote survival. But the goal is not just to mindlessly absorb and imitate others, but to build a base of experience from a wide array of experiences, and then choose your next best step.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I just had this thought of, because we do mirror everything that is around us, I would imagine, like, from animals to humans, getting a sense of identity can be really hard, because I truly believe you are what you hang out with, but it's interesting because you have to decipher, like, do I really like this, or do I just like it because everybody around me does?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in addition, to complicate it further, you have all these sort of advice mongers telling you, that's not your true self. Your true self is this. And then you think, just what you said is like, well, is that really my true self? Or is that just what they are telling me is my true self? Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is, your true self wants to feel good, but the human brain can look out for your long-term best interest, and your mammal brain releases the good feelings based on your immediate self-interest. So the two brains have to work together. And I'll give you a simple example is if your friends are all getting pizza or binge drinking, let's say, and if you join them, then in the short run, you might feel good, both the good feeling of what you're ingesting and the good feeling of the social bonding. And then your human brain is thinking, well, in the long run, if I keep doing this, I may have a bad end. And then that gives you a bad feeling. But then you think, if I refuse to go along with this, then I'll be socially isolated. And that will give me a bad feeling. So this big brain of ours can calculate costs and benefits, long run, short run, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. So there are so many angles, and you're trying to weigh all of them and predict your best next step. So you're, it's like, what is the real me is like, based on my best current knowledge, what is my best next step toward feeling good and avoid feeling bad?
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I wrote that down too. And because in your book, you say many people continue an unhealthy habit, then risk their relationships. And that's actually something that I experienced because it was drinking. I stopped drinking. I haven't drank in nearly 8 years now. And when I stopped, there's a lot of people I never heard from again. I never got an invite from. And it definitely, looking back, I can be like, yes, that example is so accurate, because it was, do I continue to drink to be social with these people, or do I feel better mentally and physically and my health gets better, but I sit home alone? And ultimately I chose being alone because I knew that the other one was not sustainable.
Yes, absolutely. Now, needless to say that you don't have to be alone, that there are other people that don't drink.
Now, however, of course,
those people have their own rules, their own rule book. of like, they expect you to go along with whatever their thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what was so amazing to me, to learn about animal social groups. And humans are wired more uniquely than animals, because animals have more hardwiring at birth and humans don't. So we're all more unique from others. And that's why we're all like, ooh, you're different. You're doing it wrong. I know the right way to live. And then there comes this moral superiority thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you didn't go along with other people with their drinking, they're not going to admit that, like, I don't want to hang out with you because you make me feel bad about myself. So they could find some moral superiority way to distance you and still put themselves in the one-up position.
Right.
So that's the serotonin thing. We could talk about that if you want, but everything.
Yeah, explain that. I'm all ears. I'm just listening. I'm like, you could explain this whole book to me, because I read it and then I also got the audiobook, because for me, I could read like 30 pages and not know what I just read. So then I was listening to it also. And then I was listening and I have all these like goofy notes of just words. Like literally it says monkey banana with nothing else. Like I was just like jotting things down because so much like took my attention. So yes, please explain.
Sure. Well, first I have to say that your reaction is normal, because this is so entirely different from everything that has been explained to us. And that's why I was so like horrified after I took my early retirement. Like, how come nobody has told me this after like a lifetime of studying psychology?
Right.
And then the second thing is, so many readers send me their copy, like the pictures or copy where they've like highlighted every other word in different colors and put Post-it notes of different colors. People tell me that they have to listen to the audiobook over and over.
Yeah.
So it really is hard to process and you're literally making new connections between things, which is exactly what I was doing when I was discovering all these monkey studies. And also, this is like why I keep trying to, I write another book that tries to simplify it. Then I make another video that tries to simplify it.
Yeah.
Then I make another infographic that starts to try. Then I make another book. So that's.
But what is that in my monkey brain that I am notorious for beating myself up? Like you just told me, like everybody does that. But here I am thinking, no, I am the only person who cannot retain this information. And the imposter syndrome comes in where I'm like, I'm going to have this author on who has written a book all about the brain. And my brain is literally not working right now.
Okay. So here's the serotonin thing. Okay. So social comparison is a natural animal impulse. This was discovered a century ago. You've heard of the quote unquote pecking order. So literally a century ago, a researcher discovered that chickens literally have an order in which they peck at food. And if they try to peck at the food before a chicken who's stronger than them, that chicken is going to peck at them and they're going to get badly injured.
Oh my God.
So the memory of getting pecked at and injured in the past triggers cortisol, the stress chemical, and you pull back until all the mammals or animals stronger than you have eaten. And then it's your turn. And then you're like, the serotonin turns on. It's like, okay, now it's my turn. Now I'm the strong one. And then all of the ones who are weaker than you pull back until you finish. And then they know it's their turn. So this is the hierarchical behavior that researchers have found in animal groups. And it sounds like not nice. And so academic psychology doesn't talk about it. I've written 2 books on this. One is called Status Games, Why We Play and How to Stop. And the other is called I'm Mammal, How to Make Peace with the Animal Urge for Social Power. So we're all doing this all the time. When you see that you're in the position of strength, your animal brain releases a little bit of serotonin. And that's a nice, calm feeling of confidence that says, I'm the strong one. I can meet my needs. When you see that you're in the one down position, your animal brain releases cortisol that says, I better not assert myself because I'm going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know when you're in the position of strength and when you're in the position of weakness? And the simple answer is whatever triggered your serotonin when you were young wired you to say, this is it. Now I'm the good guy. When you were young, whenever you felt like you were in the one down position, that wired you to feel one down in similar situations. So we're constantly creating that one up, one down feeling. So in your past, everyone has those moments when they were told you're wrong. Somebody else is right. And like, if you make that into a trauma, then I don't think it's a really helpful way to look at it, because then everyone just goes around, I'm some victim of trauma, and now I have to wait for someone to fix me.
Right.
And that sort of, you just spin your wheels. So the bottom line is to say that every mammal goes through the world driving themselves crazy over social comparison and making big deals over slight differences, because of those neural pathways we built from past experience. And the reality is that we all want to be special, but we all have to share the world with 8 billion people that want to be special as much as we do. So we're all desperately looking for those little serotonin moments that tell us, okay, now you're special. But then the serotonin is soon metabolized and it's gone. And then you drive yourself crazy looking for another serotonin moment.
Right. And I could imagine too, social media and the need to feel special is like, it's insane. And I see what social media does to a lot of people's mental health. And when I was reading that, it definitely came across my mind, where it's like, we all are surviving and we want to feel so special. And we go on, the internet or hang out with certain people so that we get that quick fix of that specialness and that validation.
Yes. So it's true. But what I explain in my books is that every generation looks for specialness in whatever way is available at the moment when they're in their formative years. And 150 years ago, people wore corsets and they competed, like whoever could wear the tightest corset, and practically kill themselves wearing the tightest corset in order to be in the one-up position. And men did that too. I was surprised to believe, like Prince Albert, when he married Queen Victoria, was wearing a ridiculously tight corset to make his waist look small.
Yeah.
So this is how, and we all look for shortcuts, like the fastest, easiest way to get that charge of one-up feeling. And that wires you to repeat that behavior. And you're going to keep doing that until you build an alternative pathway that says, I can get up a one-up feeling in another way.
Right. Right. And that's what I wrote Monkey Banana for, because like the one line that really stuck out to me is like, if a monkey is out in the wild and they don't get the banana they want, they don't sit there and cry about it. They don't go, oh my God, my banana's gone and that was for me and I wanted that. They're like, so all right. Unfair. Yeah. They're not like, oh, my life is over. They're like, okay, where's the next banana? I got to do what I got to do. And that is kind of, I've actually been like thinking about that a lot in the last week of reading this book and listening, of like, you know what, if I don't get something that I don't want or that I wanted, and if if something didn't work out the way I thought it was supposed to, it's not my banana. I got to get the next banana.
That's great. That's great. It sounds to me like you have a lot of self-awareness and you've benefited tremendously from it. And I wonder if you might even have more self-awareness than Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, wow. I'm going to save that clip for
We don't know the truth of what she thinks as opposed to her public persona.
Right. Right. And that's why I asked you, because I feel like sometimes the self-awareness, while I appreciate it a lot, and like I've worked very hard to get to that level, it does feel like you spend a lot of time alone because you're more selective of who you spend your time with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you spend time alone, you have the opportunity to choose your inputs. And maybe you find a book that really speaks to you. Whereas when you're following the herd, you have less control over your inputs. Mm-hmm. And this is why I write in all of my books. So a gazelle is constantly making a decision when to follow the herd and when to go its own way toward greener pasture. And it would rather go toward greener pasture because when it follows the herd, all the grass around it has been peed on. And gazelles really know the difference, and they hate to eat grass that has been peed on. But when they go their own way and they get too far from the herd, their cortisol surges because when a mammal is isolated, predators pick them off instantly. And so they panic when they get too isolated. And that's why when you hear a cow moo, it's like the cow is looking around saying, oh, I don't see anybody. Where are you? Moo, moo. Let me hear where you are so I can, connect.
I'm the cow mooing at the moment. How do we turn our high cortisol from fear into something productive?
So I have another book on this called Tame Your Anxiety, Rewiring Your Brain for Happiness. Happy to give you a free PDF of the book or whatever form you want. Yeah. So cortisol builds huge pathways in your brain. Like I mentioned about touching fire, that's its job, is whenever something bad happens, to wire you to say, next time, you're going to be able to predict that bad thing in advance so you don't get burned. And so you go through life constantly trying to predict bad things. And the well-known example is the pain of a lost romance. Mm-hmm. And then you think, oh, I'm never going to let that happen again. Mm-hmm. So you're constantly trying to predict romances so that you could avoid pain. And all the advice mongers out there have made it worse with this expression called red flags. So they convince
Tell me.
They convince you that all romantic disappointments are predictable. And so if you have lost love and romantic pain, it's your fault for not having predicted it. And then you obsess over looking for red flags and you see red flags everywhere. So then you can never love anyone. Mm. So the way I look at it after like having had 2 long-term marriages at my advanced age. So I would say that everyone has quirks. And if you're not dealing with one person's quirk, you're dealing with another person's quirks. Mm-hmm. And the quirks of other people, you can't even imagine them because you only know the quirks of the people you grew up with. So you try to avoid those quirks. And that can sometimes lead you to another person with those quirks because you know how to manage them. Or it could lead you to run from those quirks and then be blind to other quirks. And then you leave that one and then there's yet more quirks, Mm-hmm. So really is having realistic expectations about romance. And that's why it's like in chapter 1 in the book, if you remember where I say that love triggers all 4 happy chemicals because that's what that's highly motivating because our brain evolved to spread its genes. That's the highest motivation of your brain, even though you're not consciously thinking that. So when you have an opportunity for what the mammal brain calls reproductive success, what biologists call reproductive success, all the happy chemicals are triggered. And that's why you get such a high motivation.
Mm-hmm. So when all those 4 chemicals fire off in the brain and we strive for that. We strive to feel that all the time. And I wanted to talk to you about the dopamine droop. That was, when you have people who do drugs or even love addiction, like you have substance abuse and all these things. Will you explain to people what the dopamine droop is and oxytocin disappointment?
Sure. So all of our happy chemicals are designed to turn on in short spurts because that's what motivates you to take action. And that's the job of happy chemicals, is to get you to take action, not to make you happy all the time by sitting on the couch. So dopamine turns on when you see an opportunity to meet a need. It creates a sense of excitement which is a release of energy. And that's the energy that you could think like our caveman ancestors had the energy to climb another mountain when they were hungry and thirsty to try to find food on the other side. So you get excited when you think, oh, I'm just about to get it. I'm really close to a reward. And we want that good feeling of dopamine excitement all the time, but it wouldn't make sense to have it all the time. And it wouldn't be able to do its job. You'd be just like wasting your energy on things that weren't actual rewards. The bottom line is once, like if you see a banana in the distance, your dopamine turns on, you walk toward the banana. Then once you get the banana, the dopamine stops because it has already done its job of getting you there. And now the monkey is eaten. It takes a rest. It grooms another monkey. And then it's ready. It's hungry again. It looks for another banana. So the hunger is like the unmet need. And then dopamine is what motivates it to find a way to meet that unmet need, to find more food or water. Mm-hmm. And that's why our dopamine is constantly going up and down. And the bad feeling of cortisol is the unmet need that gives you the opportunity to then feel good about meeting the need. So if you expect this good feeling to be on all the time for no reason, or if you think I'll be happy forever once I reach this goal or that goal, this is not how our brain is meant to work. And we really need to know that. But that's why people often chase whatever turn on the good feeling in their past. So if they feel this dopamine droop, like once I get the banana, the good feeling stops, then I go more easily into any bad feelings that I had in my past because there are real physical pathways in my brain. So then I think, how can I make this bad feeling stop? Oh, I know, I could go for another banana. But instead of a banana, it's whatever made you feel good when you were young, whatever relieved a bad feeling in your past. Mm-hmm. So a simple example would be a video game that a young person feels threatened. They play a video game and that absorbs their brain. So they stop thinking about the threat. And so then every time they feel threatened, they quickly turn to a video game and they don't even know why.
Right. Yeah. And also something you talk about is when things don't feel new anymore. And I really loved that because, you know, we're searching for that thing to get our, you know, our dopamine going and lessen our cortisol. And we're like, oh, this food, we got to go to this restaurant, and you have something for the first time and it's so amazing. And then you tell your friend, okay, let's go to this restaurant. I want you to try this. And then you go and it doesn't taste the same. And it's not because it's not the exact same dish. It's because it's not brand new to us. So we don't necessarily like it anymore. We think something's wrong with us or it's wrong with the dish. And I thought that was really interesting on how humans just always want something to be new and exciting. And we think it's because like, oh, humans, they ruin everything, blah, blah, blah. But it's really, that's just what our brains are doing to survive.
Yes, exactly. A simple example, like when I was young, I would get excited about discovering a new flavor of ice cream. And eventually, like inevitably, I would run out of new flavors of ice cream. Now, a bad response would be like, once you eat ice cream, the good feeling is soon over. And then you're back to where you were before. So if you manage your dopamine by like eating more ice cream, that's going to be a really bad loop. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand your dopamine and to say, there are thousands of different ways to stimulate dopamine. Let me explore some new ones.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the most effective way to create a new habit and these new circuits in our brain? Or what is the most effective way to stop the bad habits?
Sure. So first, the bad habit is a big neural pathway in your brain built from this big past experience. So the only solution is to build a new neural pathway.
I'll tell you one of my worst habits. I pick at my face. Anytime I see a magnifying mirror, I will look at every pore, and it is, I don't want to do it anymore. And it's literally out of habit. I
remember doing that.
Yeah, it's out of complete habit. It's not because there's anything there. My skin is clear, but I need to make sure there is literally nothing on my face every single time I go into the bathroom. And it is like, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yes, I know. I absolutely had habits like that. So, and it's fascinating to know that monkeys have these habits too. It's a self-grooming loop. So, and the first time you did it, it distracted you from some other threat. Like, if my appearance is flawed, then this bad thing will happen to me. If I check my appearance, I can protect myself from that bad thing happening. That's where the physical neural pathway comes from. So the new solution, it can even there's even Latin word for when monkeys do this. Oh, it was so sad because I went to a zoo where all of these monkeys had pulled their hair out one by one, and then literally their babies did it by watching the mothers do it. It was painful. And the babies hadn't even gone through, quote unquote, the trauma that the mothers went through. It was just a learned thing.
Monkey see, monkey do. That's where it comes from. And it's interesting because I have become so aware of it too. Now that I have a nephew, he's 2.5, and he picks up absolutely everything that I do.
Yes. It's funny because I have grandchildren now. I have a grandchild who's 2.5, and you're in a really good situation because with a nephew, you're a little bit just removed enough where you can see the reality without being over involved in the drama.
Yeah. But I see how quickly he retains things and how you're like, where did he hear that? And then all of a sudden we, turn on the TV, the movie that he's watching, and it's like, oh, he's reciting it word for word almost. And it's like,
absolutely.
And it's crazy. And I think too, because we didn't have social media when we were younger, so we didn't see how we did it. It's new for us to see how a kid retains information so quickly. So I'm like, was I like that when I was a kid? And I assume so, because I see so much of my nephew in me and vice versa. But sorry, we got sidetracked off of that. But
of how to cure the habit. But
so how do I stop picking up my face?
Grandson, they wouldn't let him near phones. But the minute he got near a phone, he knew exactly the hand gesture because they'd seen it a million times.
He knows how to decline a call. He knows how to go exactly to my Spotify and find Karma by Taylor Swift. He knows exactly what album to press, and he's not even 3 years old yet. And it's it's wild, but it's also so, I'm like, wow, is he a mini genius, or is he just, that's what humans do. They mirror their mother. They mirror the adults around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the adults are over involved in the situation. So they don't want to see that. So they want to think that they got the behavior from X, Y, and Z. So, and they do, they absorb behavior from everywhere, but that includes their closest models. So the solution, let's focus on the solution before we run out of time.
Yes.
So the unwanted behavior is a real physical pathway that was paved by real physical chemicals in the formative years. So the solution is to build a new pathway. And once your formative years are over, it takes a lot of repetition to do that. And I'll explain how to do that in a minute. But first, you have to target what you want your new behavior to be. So a simple, let's use a ridiculous example. Let's say that you decide that when you see a mirror and you're tempted to look at your skin and pick at it, and you're not going to be consciously aware that maybe you're worried about criticism and you're worried about social ostracism because that's a real thing when you're young, and when you watch nature videos, you see whoa, it's a real thing for monkeys.
Right.
So to say, I use ridiculous examples. Okay. The next time I see a mirror, I'm going to spin around in a circle.
Yeah.
Because
I'm going to be the dizziest girl in the world.
I'm going to pat my elbow. I'm going to pat each elbow when I see a mirror, because that will jolt you into your conscious brain. So I'm going to then become aware that here I see the mirror. I have an urge to do something, because that's what cortisol is, the urge to do something. And the something I'm going to do is to pat my elbows. Now, the next time you see a mirror, you're not going to want to pat your elbows. You're going to want to check your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get yourself to choose the new behavior, you're going to give yourself a reward. And that's how dogs learn to do tricks, is they get tiny rewards for tiny steps toward building a new pattern. So what reward are you going to give yourself? So simple example, let's say you give yourself a cookie. Okay. And, food rewards are all taboo, but let's say that you bake a batch of cookies out of healthy ingredients,
Mm-hmm.
and you make them small and you put them all in the freezer, and you take one out, one a day when you do this thing, or every time you do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But alternatively, a good reward is to give yourself 5 minutes of free time to listen to comedy or to listen to something you love.
Mm.
That's a great reward.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say that I use it in the book 45 days. In 45 days, the new pathway will be built, and it will be your new normal. And the next time you see a mirror, you'll probably crack up laughing.
Yeah.
But it will just redirect your pathway. So what's important to know is, why do we use our old pathways? Is the electricity in your brain flows like water in a storm. It flows into the pathways you have. So until you build a new pathway, you're going to keep flowing into your old pathway. So you just have to build a new pathway. So for the drinking, for example, you said to yourself, not drinking feels better.
Mm-hmm.
And being alone feels better than being with people who drink. So you gave yourself a reward. You gave yourself a positive expectation. It was a new pathway in your brain, and now you flow into that. So every time you have an unwanted behavior, you have to design the new pathway you want to have, and then reward yourself for repeating that new behavior until it gets wired in.
Mm.
So then the new behavior could be to say to yourself, oh, there's nothing wrong with my skin. I don't have to worry about people judging me. But you're not going to believe that. So you have to go back to that more primitive level of response.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of self-discipline, I find. Like, you have to have a lot of self-discipline to not just live out of pure survival. It's hard.
Yes. And it's curious, because then when you keep living out of pure automaticity,
mm-hmm.
then things get worse and worse. Then you have less and less energy to devote to your new choice.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that, something that I really try to practice every day is being in the present moment? And would you say that it's harder for us to be in the present moment, or because we're constantly in our, like, especially with, animals and lizards and monkeys, like, how do they remain in the present moment if they're always thinking about, like, I can't be eaten or I need to eat?
Okay. Wow. That was a lot of questions.
Sorry.
So, no, I'm going to say that if I don't hit all of them, remind me what I didn't hit.
Okay.
So animals are constantly living with the threat of predators. But
mm-hmm.
if they refuse to go out, then they're going to starve to death.
Right.
And then hunger drives them to go out.
Mm-hmm.
So because we can meet our basic survival needs so easily, that gives us too much energy left to focus on these threat perceptions that we
mm-hmm.
create. That's the first whole thing. Second whole thing is your big cortex can imagine abstract future threats that don't exist now, and the animal brain can't do that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So now I feel like there was more part of the question. What was the question?
Is it harder for us? Like, I beat myself up for not being in the present moment.
Oh, the present moment. Okay.
So is it just structurally harder for us to be in the present moment because we are just trying to survive at the same time? Like, does everybody have to work so hard to be in the present moment? So
you are presupposing that being in the present moment is the solution to everything, because that's the popular advice that is being given. But I don't agree with that advice.
Ooh, tell me why. Tell me why.
So the human cortex is like the big pink fluffy part of the brain that we see in images. Our emotions are controlled by the limbic system underneath that people have heard of, like the amygdala and the hippocampus and hypothalamus and all that. So that animal part of the brain is always in the present moment, has a very minuscule ability to anticipate the future, almost nothing. So the human brain, this big, giant, pink, fluffy part, animals don't have that. So the whole human brain is about predicting the future. But then that's only one part of your brain, because then you have the animal part. So whenever you're doing something an animal could do, you're using that. So the big human fluffy part of the brain is not in control of your body. It's the animal limbic system that controls your body. So the big human brain is trying to control your animal brain so that can control your body. So you're always sort of trying to persuade your inner mammal to go along with stuff.
Yeah.
So it's the two brains working together like a horse and rider that leads to the most peace in the long run, because both brains are there because we need both. And we both of them have value. So if your cortex hates your animal brain hates your cortex, that's not good for you. You're not making the best use of the information you have. So to me, this present moment theory is like one part of your brain trying to cut off the other part of your brain, and the two brains being at war with each other. So the way I explain it is this present moment thing is a way of stopping and putting on the brakes when you're about to go into that automatic bad habit. And that's valuable, but it doesn't help you carve a new pathway in your brain. Because that's the new trail that you want to carve in your brain, is using your big cortex to say, what else could I do in this moment? And that's really hard work, to marshal all your resources to blaze a new trail. And you don't do that by just, being the present moment.
And why do you say 45 days to create a new habit?
So interestingly, I said that in the first book because that's what I was told by a yoga teacher who kept saying, the research says this and the research says that. And then when I looked for the research, I didn't find it. And I actually found that, like many of these yoga teachers, they were arrested under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah. And they say like 2 weeks, like, oh, it's 2 weeks to change your diet, 2 weeks to do this.
I see. Oh, okay.
Like, what is it in our brain?
So there's various theories, but I think it really has to do with how deep is the old pathway, which has to do with how young you were when you learned it, how often it was reinforced, and how big was the threat or reward and the chemical surge that originally created it. In addition, then there's the new behavior. How long does it take the new behavior to be learned? It depends how big is the new reward and how much you're rewarded for the new behavior and how often you repeat it.
And what would you say is the easiest way? Because we do a lot of bad habits subconsciously, like we don't even realize we're doing it. So for people listening, what would you say is the easiest way for them to identify a bad habit?
Okay. So ironically, when I said that these bad habits are just neural pathways that were built when you're young, a lot of people find that offensive and even insulting, because they're like, how dare you say that I'm just repeating a pattern I learned when I was young? So it makes people feel bad. And yet we're so good at seeing this in others. So I suggest, like, step one, when you see other people having a very marked pattern, quietly, calmly, ask them to tell you stories about when they were young. And you will be amazed to see how they're just repeating stuff they did when they were young because it was rewarded or because it helped them escape from pain. So do that with a few people. Don't expect them to agree with you because they resist this just as much as you do. But once you see this in a few people, then you'll be a little more willing and courageous to explore this in yourself. And then you'll see how your own impulses are just old neural pathways, and be more willing to take responsibility for managing your own brain instead of taking comfort in this, like, it's not my fault I do this, it's the fault of this and this and this.
Right. Well, this was this is a lot of information, and it was so much fun because I mean, I know the present moment in my brain, like both of those things were happening at once, because I definitely was trying to like focus, which is like the survival in me, because of course they're doing construction right now. Of course I have a head cold. Of course this and that. And I'm like, no, I'm going to get this done. And then the other part of me is like, I have to be so in the present moment because I want to hear exactly what you're saying. And I want to take in all this information. And then your brain is like doing all these things at one time. And you're like, oh my God, how do I get it to stop? Like, how do I just like, oh, so thanks for bearing with me. I don't know if you can hear that.
I thought you did a fabulous job because your questions were really sincere and were really thoughtful responses rather than just like an academic outline or something.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just trying to learn.
Yeah.
Especially like this is the way I retain information better, as like having the conversation. And also like I try to do these podcasts as if nobody's listening, because I don't want to sound like I'm a robot, and like, because I know I'm smart. I'm not going to like talk bad about myself, but I am not the most educated person in the world, and I wouldn't want to be. I want to keep learning. And I think that I get scared to ask certain questions because I don't want to sound stupid, and I don't want people to be like, oh God, Brittany doesn't know what that means. But I'm like, you know what? Somebody listening probably doesn't know what XYZ means either. So let's be in it together. So thank you for all your thoughtfulness and all your explanations, and tell people the names of your books that you have out so that they can read more into this information.
Sure. Well, my 8th book is coming out in January. So let me say that my website is innermammalinstitute.org. innermammalinstitute.org. My introductory book is Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin Levels. And I have a free 5-day happy chemical jumpstart, my website. So you could get 1 email a day for 5 days on each of the chemicals. That's a really simple introduction. And then you'll be on my newsletter list. And if you don't like to read, I have videos, podcasts, infographics, and all the details about all of my books.
What's the name of your podcast?
The Happy Brain.
Okay. Amazing. I have one more question if you have time.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to like the happy brain, how do you deal with any mental health issues of like depression or anxiety or anything of that sort?
When I was younger, I would say that I had a lot of social anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah. Why?
Well, because as the more you studied the brain, did all of that dissipate? Like the more you understood it?
Yeah. But it did with like in certain things, I had to notice when I was having a strong bad feeling and saying, what triggered that bad feeling? I'm not thinking anything bad. I don't know how I created that feeling. And it's like, well, what happened a minute ago? What happened 2 minutes ago? What happened 3 minutes ago? And try to sort of wind back the camera and say, oh, that's when the bad feeling started. What's the pattern? What happened in my past that is similar to the basic pattern of what was going on then? Mm-hmm. Now, what do I need to do to rewire that feeling? And it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how it could be so simple. Yeah. Like it sounds like it could be so simple, but also to like really pinpoint those things and investigate them within yourself is also very hard at the same time. Yeah.
But I'll just give you a simple motto that like reminds me is like, I can say, my husband gets on my nerves, but they're my nerves.
Yeah.
So I'm responsible for managing them.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of the information. And I really enjoyed this conversation. So I hope everybody checks this book out and all of your books. I mean, it's truly great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Also, you sound like Jamie Lee Curtis. Do people tell you that?
No, that's interesting. So
speaking voice.
Oh, okay. She may have I hear her as having a low voice, and I may have do I have a low voice?
I don't know what it is, but
or is it the accent? I have to look up where she grew up, because I grew up on Long Island, and then I had to unlearn my Long Island accent. That would be so interesting if she had the same thing.
Yeah, now I have to look. I feel like
she's from Hollywood.
Yeah, she is. But I don't know. The way your mannerisms too, you guys kind of look alike. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is amazing, but you sound a lot like her to me. So
that's funny. Oh, you know who I hear about more is I forgot her name. The Amy Farrah Fowler on The Big Bang Theory. What's her name?
Don't know.
Oh, wait, do you watch The Big Bang Theory?
No, I do not.
Oh, well, she's the girl who played Blossom.
Oh, yes. Oh, right. Yes, I could see that. I hear that.
And on the TV show, she plays a neuroscientist. So that makes it even more so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to ask, so maybe you'd want to be on my podcast.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
I would absolutely love to. That would be amazing. This was great. Okay. Hopefully it was great. I mean, I feel like I was my brain was working like a million miles a minute.
Well, why don't we wait for a few weeks, and then we could talk about possible topics.
Yeah, of course.
I never do. What's your main thing?
Usually I have people come on here and talk about the TV shows that have helped their mental health.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Because what would you say your TV show is?
Well, so here's the thing. You heard me say that in order to build a new habit, that we need to have rewards that are easily accessible to reward ourselves. And I have even used like TV and movies, like I'm going to watch for 10 minutes and I'm going to do this. Like I told you, I have like this tech phobia. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to do this horrible tech task for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to go watch a fun show for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to do the tech thing for 10 minutes. And then what? So I tell people, and I forgot to say, I was going to say this to you and I forgot, to develop like a pantry, like they say, to have a pantry full of healthy snacks to avoid eating junk food. Mm-hmm. So you need to have a pantry full of fun activities that are not junk food to reward yourself with. And so that's why I like to talk about healthy things to watch so that people don't like fill themselves up on like unhealthy things to watch.
Well, I mean, that's so true because I find Friends is the healthiest thing for me to watch because it's funny. I know everything's going to be resolved. I absolutely love the way they treat each other. And then when I watch shows, like I'm watching Friday Night Lights right now, I am so stressed out and like irritated after I watch that show because everything that's happening is like, oh my God. But like, I keep watching it because I need to know how it all pans out. And I love the characters and the cute boys, but it's like, it's when people are like, why won't you watch this show? Why won't you watch this show? And I think it is a lot of like my brain chemistry where I mirror it very quickly. I take on that energy of what I'm watching very quickly. Oh, that's why you just Friends.
You just raised so many good subjects. So, and I've forgotten them already, but okay. So this will be great. And, we could set a time if you want, like a month from now or something.
Yeah, I would love to come on and talk about it. I would absolutely love that.
Good, because what I always talk about in my books is how to find that reward zone for yourself. That it's not what other people like, but you have to find it for yourself.
Yeah. So, what would you say is your go-to show?
So, like you said, like it runs out. But right now, I love this thing called Montalbano. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
So it takes place in Sicily, where my grandparents were from. And it's what I'll explain in the show, and I always explain, when I watch something in Italian, Spanish, or French, I listen to the words and then I see it in English and I connect the words and like I can't understand the language unless I see it in English, and then I know what they're saying because I studied them. So it absorbs me so much that I completely let go of whatever was on my mind, and I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, Montalbano has all the sort of benefits of a detective show, but without violence.
Oh,
so, and all the fun of like international travel with a detective show. So
Okay.
it's like my perfect intersection of all the things I like.
Yeah.
But they made about 40 episodes,
Uh-huh.
and I've seen them all twice, except for the last 3. So I'm saving them for like a bad time.
Yeah. I love that though, because it's so true. Like when your brain has to focus on something and it's a productive thing to focus on, you do forget. I mean, during COVID, I did so many Lego sets and it was like, but it was a productive habit. So doing things that are productive. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've watched Titanic in Spanish because I love that movie. And I'm like, I have to focus extra hard. And I'm like, oh, how do you say it? Don't let go in Spanish.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. So we'll talk about our different, like, I know we'll both try to make our list, and we'll talk about our different strategies. And then the idea is to help other people come up with their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Great.
This was a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to come on your podcast and get to know more about you as well.
The other thing is, like, you have some celebrity knowledge, right?
A little bit.
That's also interesting because of this whole. So the modern disease model of mental health, which I don't agree with, is based on the idea that other people are happy all the time and we're somehow missing out. And I always have this idea, this theory that celebrity gossip is actually healthy because it cures you of that idea that other people are happy all the time.
Well, look, those are the people I look up to the most, are the ones that I see have struggled, because I go, okay, Jennifer Aniston went through a really bad breakup. I can get through one too. And so, and you know, or Selena Gomez, she talks about her mental health a lot. And I always think, you know what, if this woman who has the biggest platform of the world and all this celebrity can be so vulnerable and open about going to seek out help for her mental health, then it's okay for me. Like, those are the celebrities, quote unquote, that I look up to and that I, you know, admire and respect, because they seem like they have an attainable life because they're real people.
But it also helps to give you realistic expectations. Right. You don't have to feel like you're a total failure if you have a breakup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, look, Taylor Swift is literally the queen of the world right now, and she's single, so it's okay.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it might possibly give you unrealistic expectations. So we could talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I think it has mirrored something in me where I'm like, well, successful women just don't belong in relationships, where that's probably not the best extreme to go to. Because I'm like, in my head, you can't have both. You either have to be a really successful woman and be single, or you compromise yourself to be in a relationship.
Are you willing to talk about that? Or we could talk about it if you want, but if you don't want, we don't have to.
I'm willing to talk about anything. I mean, we're still recording technically right now.
Okay. So. You know what would be interesting to talk about? Yeah. And I'm fine with if you want to use any of this. I would look for healthy movies about relationships, which are like damn hard to find. So I'll look at that.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, I think, you know, one of my favorite movies is Friends with Benefits with Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis. And I think also it's these movies that program us when we're younger, that the man's going to come to his senses and change their mind, and they're going to fall in love with us and this and that. So it is hard, like every single movie that, you know, girls or women watch when we're younger and are
absolutely,
it's all about how a man could change. And
absolutely.
I mean, from when Harry met Sally,
guns, and you're always right and they're always wrong and they're a jerk and they should do things your way.
And so it's very, I don't know. I don't know if there is I would love for people to send me examples of like really healthy ways to like date in a movie. I mean, I think, but they're all very realistic because
let me give you a great example though. And we could use this I was talking to someone on a weight control podcast, and it was this anxiety she had about, she couldn't date until she lost weight. And you may know that this often doesn't happen.
Right.
It's like chicken and egg thing, right?
Right.
So I said, well, what if you just remained overweight and dated someone who was a little bit overweight. And she just shut down, like she could not possibly think of that. So this shows that it's not about the other person, because it's like, I have to be perfect in order to get a perfect guy. And I can't even date until I'm perfect. And then I have to find something wrong with every guy who's not perfect. And or alternatively, I could accept my imperfections, accept a guy with imperfections, and be happy now. So what would be so taboo about being happy now? I think it's because people like identified with parents who were unhappy, and they felt like they were like, especially divorced parents. And then they were like doing some higher cause by failing in a relationship the way their parents failed.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it. I mean, I've definitely been there before. Like I'm like, well, nobody's going to date me until I lose, X amount of weight. And I have lost X amount of weight, and I've never gone on a single date since. So it's like, it doesn't work like that. Like you don't like it. And it goes back to like, life doesn't get better when, like, I think you have to choose for life to be good now.
And that's the dopamine thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. We have so much to talk about. I know.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much. And I will probably use some of that we just talked about in your episode as well.
Okay.
But again, thank you so much. And I will see you on your podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.